I'm very pleased to be here at this conference on Cyprus issue, which is very timely and important. And so, as usual, my thanks to the organizers, the Near East University. I shall be brief in my presentation, not only because I do not wish to encroach on your patience, but because this happens to be the final session of the day, and people might feel tired. So I'm grateful to those of you who chose to remain here, especially the students who seems to have heeded Professor Kabalioğlu's suggestion. And of course, it's a great pleasure to see old friends with us, and I mean Mr. Ersin Tatar, a long-standing friend of mine. And I thank him for choosing to be with us, probably at very short notice. The program before us for these 3 days is a very full program, and it covers a very wide range of topics under the Cyprus issue, ranging from the exploitation of minerals in the Eastern Mediterranean, Cyprus-European Union relations, security questions, strategic questions, and so on. Some of the suggestions that I plan to make now in my presentation has become probably redundant because they have been touched upon already during the previous sessions. So another reason why I shall be brief. Cyprus issue is not an incidental issue in the foreign policy of Turkey. Ever since it attained an international dimension in 1954, it has been on the agenda, even forefront of Turkish foreign policy agenda, and remained there with increasing significance ever since. The reasons why this has been a chronic and difficult issue are manifold. As in all interstate issues, which are manifested in the form of a dispute, the Cyprus dispute has its political as well as legal aspects. For there to be an attempt for the solution of the dispute, or at least for the dispute to be reduced to manageable proportions, these aspects, both of them, need to be treated separately from, but consistently with each other. When political considerations tend to dominate legal considerations, the role of international law will accordingly be limited only to the reaffirmation of the status quo. In order for there to be a meaningful and durable solution, that is to say, a solution which will be regarded as satisfactory by all the parties involved, the solution must take cognizance of the realities which exist not only now, but realities which have existed since the beginning. Realities of Cyprus issue are those relevant to the history and geostrategical position of the island, as well as those relevant to the composition of the inhabitants of the land. From the beginning, by its geographical proximity, the fate of Cyprus has been closely linked with that of Anatolia. States which have been dominant in Anatolia had also an important say in Cyprus. Throughout the history, the island successively belonged to various states. The Hittites, Egyptians, Phoenicians, Assyrians, Persians, Macedonians, and the Roman Empire. After the division of the Roman Empire into two, the Eastern Roman Empire, that is to say the Byzantines, had a say in Cyprus, and the islanders became subjugated to the Byzantine state and had to pay annual dues. After the Byzantine Empire adopted Christianity as its official religion and Greek as its official language, so the inhabitants of the island, and they adopted the Greek language and adopted Orthodox Christianity. And the inhabitants of, the Greek inhabitants of Cyprus today are regarded as descendants of the Greek-speaking Christian Levantines. The Ottoman Turks became interested in Cyprus following the fall of Constantinople. The reason why the Ottomans became interested in Cyprus is not difficult to appreciate. It had an important location, controlling not only the Eastern Europe, but the intersection of Asia, Middle East, and Eastern Europe. In 1571, during the reign of Bayezid II, the Ottomans extended their sovereignty to the island, thereby terminating Venetian domination for 82 years. And various peoples from Anatolia, Turks, Muslim Turks, were relocated onto the island. And this state of affairs, that is to say, Turkish domination, lasted from 1571 practically until 1878, when the island, the administration of the island was handed over to the British as a result of an annex to a treaty of defense between the Port and the British. And this state of affairs, the occupation of the island by the British, remained until the middle of the First World War, until 1914, when the British and the Ottoman Empire became belligerents in the war. The British annexed the island, and shortly after it became a crown colony. Today, Cyprus, with its location at the intersection of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, is in a position to control the Persian Gulf and Caspian regions, as well as traffic, both military and commercial, in the Eastern Mediterranean. An assessment of Turkish foreign policy from the standpoint of Cyprus must necessarily take into consideration the historical factor. Throughout history, the Turkish inhabitants of the island have felt the need of mainland Turkish protection, and Turkey have felt the desire to discharge its obligation to protect. By protection, I mean not only the protection of Turkish inhabitants of the island, but their protection in the island itself. And I submit that this is an important aspect which must be kept in mind uppermost. This was the legal basis of Turkey's intervention in 1974. It was an act of self-defense envisaged under general international law, also enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. I need not give an account of what happened in the near history of Cyprus, how it became a independent state, what led the island to reach this status. These are relatively well-known information. But I need to say a few things about the characteristics of the Republic so created. The underpinnings of the Republic of Cyprus founded upon three principles. It would be an independent state. The two communities, the Greek and the Turkish Cypriots, are to be politically and legally equal. And each community is independent in its own communal matters. The state which was thus founded was acceptable and workable for the Turkish Cypriots and Turkey. But the Republic foundered, and again, I need not remind you of what happened in 1963. There was dissatisfaction among the Turks, as a result of which they withdrew from the administration. But I need to remind you of an important flaw in the constitution of the Republic of Cyprus. The Republic of Cyprus, when it came into being, the inhabitants of the island had a state, but the state did not have a nation. Maybe it would be timely to speak about what is meant by nation, but I need not do that because it needs a detailed account of the sociological and the maybe the political elements of nationhood. But all I need to say is this: in order for there to be a nation, the people who have chosen to live in some sort of a unity must have a sense of doing so. Whatever the elements that make them to live in a united composition must be greater than the diversity that may exist between them. Of course, it is permissible and it is natural that there should be diversity between people who would like to inhabit a common territory, but maybe inhabit is the wrong word. What should be required for there to be a nation is cohabitation as opposed to habitation. And this was, of course, lacking. I am reminded of what I felt when I first visited Cyprus. This was way back in 1972, the first time I was here, on a touristic visit. I landed up at Limassol and then took a car and began driving towards the north. On the way, as I passed through towns and villages, ultimately reaching Lefkoşa, I saw that some buildings had hoisted the Greek flag and some buildings hoisted the Turkish flag. And as far as I could remember, the only Cypriot flag that I saw was the one that was hanging outside the palace, which I later found out to be the presidential palace in Lefkoşa. So this was a rather amusing experience. It was a state, the Republic of Cyprus, and there has to be a nation, which is a required composition of an ingredient of statehood, and yet inhabitants of the island, the Turks, more closely associated with Turkey, and the Greek Cypriots, more closely associated with Greece. And what is more, not surprising but regrettable, is the fact that this state of affairs still exists. The Greeks feeling an affinity more to what they call their mainland, Greece, and the Turkish Cypriots feeling more affinity to what they would call mainland Turkey. And this is, I think, a very great flaw in nation building, in state building in Cyprus. There has been third-party intervention in the attempts to solve the Cyprus problem. And by intervention, I mean diplomatic intervention on the part of United Nations, on the part of European Union, on the part of various other states, special representatives from Britain, special representatives from United States. I have no doubt that they have made their best endeavors for there to be a solution in the Cyprus dispute. But I doubt whether they have grasped very clearly the essential element, because no nation that could be termed as a Cypriot nation exists. And without a nation, it is impossible to build a state. And this is one of the reasons why all the attempts by these personalities, the successive Secretaries General of the United Nations, the set of ideas by Perez de Cuellar, and then more recently the plans made by Anand, I think 5 of them, have failed to reach a compromise between the two communities in Cyprus. Because all these attempts, these documents, plans, and set of ideas envisaged a sort of a political superstructure where the state would prevail. It would be a common state, but not a decentralized state. And there is a significant, a considerable emphasis on nationality. According to the Annan plans, I think the final plan, the 5th plan, there would be a nationality of the composite state, and then there would also be respective nationalities of the Turkish state of the superstructure, and there would be the Greek nationality, but the overall composite state's nationality would prevail. And to support this idea of the superstructure nationality, there were provisions in the Annan plan concerning a common flag, provisions concerning a common national anthem, and so on. All these are symbols of statehood. I think this is all I need to say in my presentation. I had taken some notes when I was listening to the presentations in the morning's session. Reference has been made to the Security Council, for example, which took a great course of action, maybe unprecedented, in passing Resolution 541. The participants dealt with this attempt by the Security Council. Of course, here the difficulties are many and complicated. Is the Security Council competent to pass legal decisions or legal assessments concerning political cases? As a political organ, of course, it is entitled to pass political questions, but decision concerning recognition or non-recognition of an entity which it itself regards as a state, this is a debatable question and unprecedented. If I'm not mistaken, it is not completely unprecedented because in 1965, I think, 65 or 66, in Rhodesia, when the white minority declared the government of Rhodesia, composed of entirely whites and headed by Ian Smith, the Security Council was seized of the dispute and it passed a resolution concerning the obligation to not to recognize the government of Rhodesia. And I think another case in point is the decision of the Security Council in the Kosovo case. But I must say again that I have not checked that these are the real precedents, but probably they are the real precedents. Anyhow, another issue connected with the Security Council decision 541, and I refer to this decision once again because not only it directly affects the Cyprus issue, but it has indirect repercussions in the sense that quite a few international courts, from the European Court of Human Rights to the Court of Justice of the European Communities, have relied upon the Security Council decision 541 in making their own determination as to whether the state, the TRNC, is really a state or not. I think I should stop here. I think I should stop here. Let us reserve these 2 minutes for prospective questions. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.